And one of the things we know, or see a lot, I should say, is that if you feel like you've made some organizational choices that really intensified the intervention and really have targeted the content to the extent that you have information about the student's needs, and the student is still struggling, or a group of students is still struggling, often some of the problem can be in the delivery of that instruction. You may very well have targeted the exact content, and it may be a very impactful area, but they're just not getting it, so to speak, and often that is related to delivery. So we can intensify interventions through these areas, which I'm sure are familiar to you. Explicit and systematic instruction. And I've split them apart. You often hear them together because they're best done together. But I split them apart just to think a little bit about what it is that we need to consider in the instruction. So we'll do that. And then practice and immediate feedback. And we've already talked about some of the problems within practice, and that relates to some of the feedback too. But we'll delve into that a little bit. So what do we mean by explicit instruction, if we're going to break that off of systematic instruction? Thinking about how to overtly teach the new concept, strategy, skill, whatever it is that is new to the student that they need. Teacher modeling is a part of that, or demonstrations, and often many examples. And these are all very dynamic. So what a student who needs a very intensive intervention needs in terms of explicit instruction is going to be very different than what a student perhaps in the core needs in terms of explicit instruction. And so we're going to think about each of these within an individual student, and that's how we intensify the intervention. And then the systematic instruction, if we break that out, is thinking about the sequential and manageable steps that a student needs in order to learn the material. So how can we break a complex skill or task down into more manageable steps, obviously progressing from the easiest to more complex? And what support can we provide, in addition to breaking it down, to allow them to master each of those steps and then bring the whole thing together? The more complex, perhaps the more steps. This also is dynamic. So what's going to be manageable for one student may not at all be manageable for another student. And that can very much be the difference between a tier 2 and a tier 3 intervention, for example.